Okay, so let's unpack this. We've all done it right. You've got a document, maybe a Word file, and you need it as a PDF.
Uh-huh.
So you pop online, find a site, drag your file into that little box, and bang, job done.
Yeah, it feels almost like magic. Like you just handed it off to a super efficient colleague or something. Instant results.
Exactly. And it is, well, incredibly convenient. That's the whole point, isn't it?
Absolutely. You don't need special software installed. You just,
Yeah.
search online. We saw Adobe mentioned, of course, but there are tons of others. The source material listed sites like thebestpdf.com, pdfguru.com, smallpdf.com, loads of them.
And they all offer that same, basically frictionless experience. It's quick, simple.
Yeah.
It just works.
It seems simple.
Right. That's the key word, seems. But what we want to do in this deep dive is, well, peek behind that curtain of convenience. What's actually happening to your file, the moment you let go of the mouse and it vanishes into that website. Because the real tension here, based on what we've read, is that convenience often pushes transparency aside. When you smooth out the friction, sometimes you also smooth out the understanding of what's going on.
And that creates this kind of blind spot, a potentially risky one.
How so? What makes it risky?
Well, think about what people are converting. It's not always just, cat pictures. It could be your CV, sensitive medical info, legal contracts.
Bank statements, confidential work stuff.
Yeah.
Really personal data sometimes.
Exactly. Sensitive information.
Okay, so technically speaking, what's the very first thing that has to happen for that online tool to even start working after you drag and drop?
Well, technically, the file has got to leave your computer. It needs to be uploaded.
Uploaded where?
To a server, somewhere else. That's just how these cloud-based tools function. They need the data on their own system, their infrastructure, to actually perform the conversion.
So it has to be stored there.
It has to be stored there, yes. Even if it's just for a short time, temporarily, while the work gets done.
And the sources we looked at confirm this, right? Adobe, for instance, they mention in their privacy info that documents from their free tool are usually deleted pretty quickly, like within hours, if you don't save them.
Yeah, they do say that. And they also say they won't share your content unless you explicitly use, like, a share button or something.
Which sounds, okay, on the surface, it sounds reassuring. Files gone quickly.
It definitely sounds better than, say, keeping it forever. But, and this is a big but highlighted in the materials, how long they keep it isn't the only thing to worry about.
Okay.
The real critical point is what might be happening during that time, however brief, that your file is sitting on their server. And crucially, whether you were clearly told about that before you uploaded.
Ah, right. Because the typical experience is you land on the web page, you see the big drag file here box, maybe a button.
Yeah, you're immediately funneled towards the upload action.
And there's rarely, if ever, a big clear message right there before you upload, saying something like, hey, just so you know, this file's going to our servers. We'll store it for X hours, maybe analyze it like this. Click here to agree.
Exactly that. The whole design is built for speed and, well, minimum fuss. The average person, especially if the site looks clean and professional, might easily just assume maybe it's happening right there on their own machine.
Yeah, they're probably not thinking, my confidential report is now flying across the internet to land on some server I know nothing about.
Probably not. And this isn't just about needing temporary storage to do the conversion itself. The sources really started digging into how these simple actions might link up with bigger tech trends.
Like what?
Like AI, machine learning, analytics. Many companies behind these tools are deep into that stuff. So while your specific file might get deleted fairly fast, its presence, even briefly, and maybe its characteristics, could potentially feed data into those systems during that processing window.
Feed data how? What does that mean?
Well, it could be things like automated analysis of the document structure, maybe even some content analysis, or collecting data about how you use the tool. They call that telemetry, just usage data sent back.
Right.
Or it could even involve using aggregated, anonymized insights from lots of documents, including yours, to help train or improve their AI models.
Okay, hold on. So it's less about them keeping my actual document forever and more about what their systems can learn from my document while it's being processed, even if the file itself disappears later.
That's the potential landscape the sources are sketching out. They use terms like content analytics and telemetry being collected. And these insights, right, even if they're anonymized later on, they still originate from your specific action, your document.
And this often happens without you being clearly told up front or given a chance to say no thanks to that bit.
That's the concern raised. The material actually described this as a potential shift, where a simple utility tool sort of becomes an insight pipeline, feeding behavioral data or document-level analysis back into their systems.
Wow. Okay, that definitely brings us to the legal side, particularly thinking about UK law, like GDPR and the Data Protection Act 2018. What's the perspective there?
Well, the core principle of those laws is giving you control, agency over your personal data. UK GDPR is really strong on transparency at the point of collection, meaning companies need to tell you clearly what data they're collecting, why they're collecting it, how they'll use it, and how long they'll keep it. And crucially, that information needs to be right there, easy to get when you're actually handing over the data.
So just sticking a link to a massive privacy policy down in the website footer, that doesn't cut it.
Generally, no. Not for this kind of just-in-time notice requirement. The idea is you should know before you hit upload, especially if it's personal data.
Right. So the moment I'm dragging my potentially sensitive file, the service should be upfront about what's happening next.
That's the standard, yes. And there's more. Processing personal data needs a proper legal basis. Temporary storage for the conversion itself. Okay, that might fit one basis. But if they're also using the document or data about your interaction for other things like analytics or training AI, they need a separate valid legal basis for that specific processing too. Often they might try to rely on legitimate interests.
But even then,
the law gives you the right to object to processing based on legitimate interests.
right to object.
Yes. But here's the catch. You can only use that right if you actually know that specific processing is happening in the first place. And you need a clear, easy way to object or opt out right then and there if it's all happening hidden in the background. Well, you effectively lose that.
Okay, let's try and boil this legal stuff down, like the sources did. Plain English. What does this mean for me, the user?
It means uploading that file isn't just like dropping a letter in a magic mailbox. You're potentially handing over personal data. And the service provider should be totally upfront about everything they plan to do with it beyond just the conversion. That includes any automatic scanning, analysis, using it to train their systems, whatever.
And I should know that before I upload.
Yes. And you should have a real choice about whether you're cool with those extra uses, because even if the file itself is deleted, the insights they gain from it might stick around and be used. You have rights, the right to know, the right to object, the right to expect honesty right when you hand over your data.
And the sources really seem to stress that the rise of powerful AI systems makes this all much more significant now.
Oh, absolutely. It changes the stakes. Before, maybe the risk felt like, okay, the company has my file for a bit. Annoying, but contained. Now, those brief moments your data sits on their server could potentially feed these enormous AI training pipelines, influencing models that might get used in ways you can't even predict down the line.
Is there a risk of, like, actual data leaking out through the AI?
It's an interesting point the material touched on. Less a direct leak of your file, perhaps, but more sort of emerging risk. What if sensitive details, inadvertently learned during processing, get somehow hallucinated or mixed into the AI's output for a completely different user later on? It's speculative, maybe, but tied to this idea of a hidden data funnel feeding the AI.
Okay, so the main message isn't necessarily stop using these online tools completely, is it? Because sometimes they feel unavoidable.
Exactly, especially on mobile, right? Well, the sources noted this too. On a desktop, you often have built-in options, save as PDF, print to PDF, things like that.
Yeah.
But on your phone, or maybe just working quickly in a browser, you often get pushed towards these cloud services. It's just the easiest path.
Which can create a sort of dependency, maybe? You use the cloud tool not because you actively chose cloud processing, but because it was just there, the easiest option.
Precisely. And that loops us right back to the core issue, the need for real transparency right at that point of interaction. If a platform needs your document on their servers to work, especially if it's a free service, they really have a duty, legally, ethically, to be super clear about all the ways they might use that document or your interaction.
And give you proper choices.
And give you meaningful, easy-to-find choices about the extra stuff, like analytics or profiling. It's basically a call for better defaults, you know?
Yeah.
More upfront privacy communication.
Okay, so let's recap the key takeaways from this deep dive. What should we remember?
Well, first, that the simple convenience of online file conversion can hide the fact that your document is being uploaded and stored, even temporarily, creating that transparency blind spot.
Right. And we explored how that temporary storage isn't just passive waiting time. It can be an active window for feeding data into analytics and AI systems.
Potentially turning the tool into an ongoing insight pipeline, learning from behavior in documents even after the original file is gone.
And we tied this back to your legal rights, especially under UK GDPR and the Data Protection Act. That need for clear upfront notice at the point of collection about data use and your right to object, which hiding details in footer links just doesn't meet. What's really striking here, I think, is how this simple example shows a bigger potential shift, where everyday tools become these quite complex data gathering points, constantly feeding AI and analytics in ways we, as users, might never fully grasp or agree to.
Yeah, it really highlights that need for better defaults. We need clear, simple privacy information before we upload, upfront explanations, genuine control.
Okay, so to wrap up, here's maybe a provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Consider treating every single upload, even for something seemingly basic like a file conversion, with maybe the same caution you'd use handing over your passport copy or a bank statement.
It's a strong comparison, but captures the essence.
Because you are offering a glimpse of who you are, what information you handle. And in today's world, with powerful AI and analytics, even a fleeting glimpse, or the data derived from it, could potentially travel further, teach systems more than you ever intended or consented to.
Right now, it feels like that convenience we all love often comes at the price of clarity. You get the quick fix, but you might not know the full cost in terms of your data.